Afternoon, Osasu Osagie. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did. You did. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's good talking to you. I was looking at your resume for this position, for this ISO position, and I was fully impressed. I seen you did poems. You have some experience with risk management, and I wanted to get you on. Do you go by Osasu, or what's your first name go by?
Yeah, so I actually do go by Osasu. I do have a lot of my peers that just calls me O. So it just depends on whatever your preference is.
Okay, understood. So, Osagie or Osasu, can you tell me about yourself?
So I'm 32. I've been in cybersecurity for about 5 years. Got into cybersecurity back in about 2018. Kind of just wanted to change the pace, something different, something that was going to generate more income for myself. So when I started cybersecurity, didn't really have much experience, but I just kind of kept my head to the ground, learned everything that I needed to learn. And then 5 years later, I am an ISO for the current program that I work for. One thing about me, man, I'm just constantly trying to advance in this space. So I'm actually going for my CISSP, and I'm just hoping that that will open more doors and opportunities for me. But I'm a very laid back, fun, loving guy. Like to hang out with my friends. But I'm also just trying to do things just to better myself, whether that be financially, um, or mentally, or even spiritually. So yeah, just I try to be like a jack of all trades. That's the best way that I can put it.
Well, that sounds good. And you've been working in the field for a good amount of time, and going for your CSSP, that's a good cert to get
Yep.
on your plate. hmm
Yep.
So, can you tell me some of your primary responsibilities as an information and system security guard? What's a typical workday?
So typical workday, I normally try to go through EMAS, assess the controls in EMAS. You may have some controls that's non-compliant. So whenever you see that, that then enforces me to do some digging. Whether, I have to talk to the engineers because it may be associated with a poem, or, it may require some documentation. And, as a team, we're already working on making sure that we're cleaning and polishing up some of the documentation that we had. And if we don't necessarily have documentation, then we're working towards a plan to put that documentation together. So the first thing, just going through emails, also just looking at our poems, trying to reduce the poem count, because sometimes it can feel like you're kicking the can down the road because you keep adding poems, but in certain programs, they're not implementing a plan to reduce and to minimize the number of poems. So even with my team, we're working together, just divvying up the number of poems based on whatever controls is associated with, to try to just get that poem count down. And then also just meetings, meeting with leadership, meeting with engineers, and then also internal meetings. Because as a team, we want to make sure that we are a cohesive unit. So if there's any areas in which we can improve on, any things that we haven't necessarily covered, then we'll discuss those things as well. And that's kind of just a routine every day. There's not really too much time to be lax, because the thing about being an ISO, you have to stay ahead of the curve, because there's always an issue that's waiting to happen. You know what I mean? So that's kind of just the process for me on a day to day when it comes to just being an ISO.
Yeah, that's kind of like the typical workday. You always have to, talk to different people, poems, vulnerability. So, I'm glad that you have that type of experience. Uh,
Absolutely.
if you encounter a vulnerability that can't be remediated uh, currently, how do you handle it?
So for me, if it's something that's dealing with, um, let's just say a particular asset, right, in our environment, needs to be upgraded, right? I would need to talk to the engineers, and let's just say, you know what, they tell me, hey, Asasu, we can't fix this immediately or right away. That's when you create a poem. But again, the thing about poems is, although you're using poems to monitor something in which you're supposed to fix or mitigate, you also want to monitor that process as well, or you're going to end up just having a whole bunch of poems that are just not addressed. So the best way, man, just get with the parties involved, typically the engineers, see what's going on. Once they give you the information that's needed, you take that information, put it into the poem, and then, my rule of thumb is to check with the engineers weekly in regards to progress so we can just close that poem out.
That sounds great. That's a good plan on how to handle them. How do you prioritize your tasks and manage your workload effectively?
To prioritize my tasks and manage my workload effectively, the best thing is just having a schedule, knowing what days I'm going to work on particular things. Like I said earlier, we kind of just have a schedule for what we're going to do on a day to day. Now, there are going to be times in which something may become priority. So therefore, we have to leave and push everything to the side and work and tackle that particular thing so we can then get back to our routine schedule. So the most important thing, realizing how important it is. If it's high on the priority list, tackle that first, and then just make your way down and tackle all the other tasks that you need to take care of. But just make sure that the one task that is very important and is high on the priority list, we got to work collectively to make sure that we take care of that particular task.
That sounds good. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, that sounds about right. So we're gonna move on to the next question. Um, could you outline the 7 steps of the RMF framework?
Sure. So you have prepare, categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and then continuous monitoring.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So, what is risk management framework and why is it crucial for organizations?
So risk management framework, in the most fundamental form, is just a guide or a template that federal agencies or contractors use, in order for them to eliminate, minimize, or just reduce the risk or impact to their information system. It's very crucial because we're dealing with exposures to our information system. We're always exposed to different threats. So, in knowing that we're exposed to different threats, we have to put up safeguards, or the information that is very pertinent that goes along with the information system, once it gets exposed, I mean, they can be very, very damaging. I'm pretty sure you heard of, people's certain information being lost, private information being lost, some information that's confidential, highly classified. So once that information gets leaked out, now you have a whole new issue on your hands. So RMF is put in place to try to mitigate those mistakes or those issues from happening.
That's 100% right. What risk management framework software tools are you proficient with?
I would say for me, EMAS. I'm also good with Stig Viewer, in regards to creating Stig checklists, and then also using ACAS as well. So
That's
that would be
good.
Security Center.
That's good. Can you describe your experience in creating and implementing uh, risk management frameworks?
So for me, the best way to go about it is just going through the steps. So even just for example, the first step is prepare. You want to kind of, in a sense, quote unquote, survey the land. Look at your organization from a risk management standpoint. Find out who are the stakeholders, who are the big decision makers. What type of technologies do we have, assets do we have on our systems, and then what safeguards do we have to put? Once you are able to collect all the information, now you're able to categorize what type of information system that you have. Once you're able to categorize what type of information system that you have, now you have to select the controls. So one of the ways in which you can select the controls is looking at the SP 800-53 revision 5, and that gives you a list of all the control families to select from. For example, you have access control, right? So with access control, or no, not access control, but account management, right? So from account management, you understand, okay, we have to find out who are going to be in control of the accounts on our information system, right? If that's the type of system that you have. So once you're able to select those controls, then you have to implement those controls. After implementing those controls, you then have to assess those controls. And that's where an assessor is now inserted into the picture, because their role is to assess the controls, look what needs to be fixed, looks what needs to be changed. If there's non-compliant controls, they need to try to make those controls compliant, or whatever they see, they need to report those findings to leadership, right? So after assessing the control, now we have to authorize it, and then that's where the authorizing official is coming into play, and they sign off on all the organizational documents or the package documents that are sent off in order for us to receive the ATO. So that is kind of basically like the SSP. You also have the architectural diagram. You also have some of the latest ACAT scans, the STIG baseline checklist, and even POAMs, because we understand POAMs are used to mitigate some of the unaccepted risks. So we can receive a 1 or 2 year, even a 3 year ATO. And we always try to shoot for at least a 2 or 3 year ATO. So that's typically the plan.
Understood. That's great. That's a great answer. And then we'll go to my final question. What methods do you use to identify and assess potential risks in an information system?
Uh, You can use ACAT scans. From the ACAT scans, you can look at the plugins and see if there is any assets that need to be patched. Also, we get an IAVM list that comes out. So we use the IAVM list just to make updates to, say, like our Microsoft Windows systems. Even just using Stig Viewer, right? Because we use Stig Viewers in order for us to create a Stig baseline checklist, right? And we try to do that quarterly, right? So you can even go to Cyber Exchange and look at the quarterly releases for some of the assets that we have, and basically sticking against those assets to make sure that we're up to date. And then also just, looking at the poems and making sure that all the poems are up to date, or just closing out all the poems, actually.
That was a great answer, Mr. Osasu Osagie. I think that's all.
Okay.
There were some great answers. We'll definitely keep in contact.
Okay.
Look forward to talking to you in the future.
All right.
Thank,
Thank you.
thank